Oh, just gonna lay out the objectives here. So first, the overall goal will be to understand what natural science article reading amounts to, and some of the techniques that is helpful in analyzing any articles you'll come across, especially if you guys are trying to go into any of the sciences or the hard sciences, as they call them. And to do that, we're gonna do two things. We're gonna try and get a sense of the purpose and structure of these sorts of articles, and then identify some key features and techniques that writers commonly use when writing such articles. Okay, so those are the objectives. To get a good sense of what that's all about, it would be good to define our terms, and this is always a very good thing to do, right? Like before you just start out doing something, especially, piece of writing, it's always good to kind of define your terms, right? Or like if you're doing some reading, to ask yourself this, like, okay, what do these terms mean that are, let's say, used in the title of the article or in the abstract or something like that? Okay, so we're going to do the same sort of thing here before getting into this. If you look at the first chapter of this workbook or this textbook, one of the things that we learn in logic, and keep this point in mind, it's a really important point, is that when you're at the beginning stages of your note taking about an article or your essay writing or whatever, and you're defining your terms, don't use some variation of the term that you're trying to define in defining the term. If you have to define something that's material, you don't want to say something like it's a physical thing, because material and physical, they mean the same thing, right? So avoid that sort of thing. This is why the definition you gave, which is a good thing, because it didn't use the word natural in defining it, right? But it's okay, because it's a mistake that we all naturally make, right? Like it happens to me all the time too, but that's something to keep in mind. So when we define natural, we shouldn't use some word that has the word natural or nature or naturalistic in it, right? We want to use something else. Otherwise, the definition kind of becomes, they say, circular. Okay, and that's really not good for clear writing. If you're being judged on your writing and you have circular definitions in your paper, especially when you're trying to argue a point, you're going to do badly on that paper, right? Especially if it's being reviewed by someone who kind of tracks these things. Okay. Okay, so here's a proposal for what natural is, which is something that is a certain way or behaves a certain way independent of us, right? Doesn't depend on us, right? So like that tree over there outside, it behaves a certain way, it is a certain way, irrespective of our interests, right? Which is different, for example, from, like this mouse, right? This mouse is what it is because of our decisions, right? It doesn't have any sort of way that it is if we weren't around, right? But like a tree or a rock or, I don't know, planets or whatever, they have their own way of being. Okay, so So there's a sense of natural where it refers to the way a thing is independent of us, which goes back to what you're saying, which is without, being kind of made or touched or tampered with by human beings. Okay. So there are things that are that way, and then we have science of them. That's the idea behind natural science. So we defined one of our terms, natural. In other words, something that has a nature, which is the way it is independent of us, or not made by us. Right now, we have to define the term science because we're saying natural science. So there are these things that are natural, and we have science of them. So what is it to have science of them? What do we do when we have science of them? And how is that different from, like, I don't know, opinions of them, right? I have an opinion about the tree. Is that science? Am I doing science? Let's start with this. Do you guys know where the word comes from and what it like means in its etymology? You guys know what that word means, etymology? It means sort of the origin of the word, like where it comes from. Okay, so science comes from a Latin word, scientia, which just means knowledge, right? Knowledge. So in that way, like it touches on what you said, science is basically knowledge about everything, right? I think you said something like that, or the study of everything. So knowledge. But what kind of knowledge is it? It's not any kind of knowledge, right? So knowledge, its etymology only helps us so much. Okay, ciencia, knowledge. Knowledge of natural things, right? This is what we have so far, knowledge of natural things. But now we need to specify a bit more. And one way is the way you said, okay, knowledge that has to do with observation. What else? You said it has to be based on facts. Yeah. Okay. So it has to be factual knowledge. Okay. It, it can't not have that. It can't be like mythological or something, right? It has to be factual. And by factual, you mean what? Evidence-based. Okay, evidence-based. So it's a knowledge that's observational, that's evidence-based, that's factual. Science has this idea of order knowledge that's systematic. Like, okay, if I want to study the science of biology, you go and you look into it and you see that everything revolves around like a given subject, right? Or a topic. It's not just a haphazard collection of facts, right? So science has this idea of systematicity to it. Now that we've defined natural science, because we define natural and science, let's move on to what natural science writing amounts to. And this is helpful for what? This is helpful for understanding natural science reading, right? If you want to read well natural science articles that deal with some scientific topic or other, you have to understand how, or it's useful to rather understand how a natural science article looks like, right? And here we're going to look at a few things, okay, that pertain to a natural science article. Okay, first we're going to look at the briefly purpose of a natural science article. What's that all about? What's the purpose of such an article? Why would somebody write something like that, you know? And how does it differ from like some other kind of article, say like a piece of poetry or some story, right? What's the difference here? And then we're going to look at a few things like uh, the audience of such articles, the characteristics, some of their features, their structure, which is important, and some of the writing techniques they use. Okay, and all of this will hopefully help you in your own analysis of such articles, like for example, the passages that are included in this workbook. And it'll be like about a theory, you know, a theory to explain things that were discovered, right? Or even things that were not discovered, right? Like we've always witnessed the movements of the heavens, of the planets, right? Or the stars. You see, like, you look up at night, I mean, it's hard in the city, but you ever gone like up north or something, you've seen the stars, right? You look up there and you're just like, whoa, like, what's the explanation behind all this, right? So a natural science article can also just try and explain or inform you, as you said, about a theory, like the theory behind the planet's movement. So it's not always about discovery, but it is about discovery, but not always. So generally speaking, we can then say that what one tries to do in a piece of writing like this is to communicate or inform or convey some information about the natural world that is either a finding, a discovery, like you said, okay, or that is some kind of a theory or an idea that explains something. Okay, and this is important in natural science articles. It should have this element of explanation. Okay, the audience, I mean, this is pretty sort of straightforward, right? General public, non-experts, but also experts. I mean, most of the stuff we'll be reading, it's going to be, it's like stuff for the general public, non-experts, because the stuff for the experts, you know, you need sort of the relevant qualifications to understand what's going on, right? Some of the key characteristics of scientific writing, okay? Be on the lookout for these because these make a piece of scientific writing good, okay? So should be concise, shouldn't be too kind of logoretic. That means too like wordy, you know, having like strong or rather long drawn out sentences and the like. So conciseness is actually a virtue in all writing, but especially a piece of writing where you're trying to inform someone of something and argue for something. Okay, you want to be concise. You want to say it in the most economical way. It should be clear. This is very important. Clarity. Okay. One of the ways to achieve clarity, as I mentioned in the beginning, is to define your terms, right? You don't want to start using a term which your audience probably does not know the meaning of. And you definitely don't want to use a term you don't know the meaning of, right? Yeah. So be clear by defining your terms. And when you're reading a piece of writing, always ask yourself, okay, he used this word, what's this word? Did he define this word? If he didn't define this word, then, you know, that's a strike against that that author, right? So define your terms to make what you're saying clear. Of course, there's also a formal language that's often part of natural science articles, right? And usually this language is like the language of, as we were just saying, math. Find a lot of like equations, and you might even find you know, data, or rather, sorry, models and the like, right? Mathematical models and other kinds of models that sort of represent the evidence or the data or whatever, right? This is part of the language. Usually this stuff, you'll find this formal language aspect, you'll find it more in scientific writing for experts, right? For our purposes, or for the purposes of like a lay audience or a general audience or a non-expert audience, this is not a part of that. Although it will use a kind of, in a way, formal language, just not sort of a formal language that's very mathematized, okay? Which is good for a non-expert audience. Because if you use that kind of language with them, if you're reading an article that's meant to be for a non-expert audience and it's full of these complicated mathematical equations, that's a bad mark on that author. You shouldn't do that, because that actually takes away from the second point, which is clarity. Okay? You're not being very clear. Right. Another characteristic is the data, obviously. Such papers are usually full of the data that we're supposed to be informed about, and the theories are supposed to explain, right? So it's good to be on the lookout for that. It's good to ask yourself, okay, what's the data here that the author is presenting, that he or she is trying to convey? What is it, right? If the writer is unclear about that, again, that's not a good sign, right? You want to be clear about that. Here's the data, and here's what to make of it, and so on and so forth, right? One of the reasons why it's important to sort of have that clearly stated is because that will go a long way into the evidence that is supposed to be presented for whatever the author is arguing for, right? The evidence will consist of the data, right? He's going to say, this is the case because of all this data, right? The data is supposed to be the evidence. If he fails to provide that, then he's failed to sort of make his case, okay? And then examples. Examples are always good. One of the reasons why they're good is because they go back to this clarity point. You always want to, if in your own sort of, you have to write such an article, or even if you have to write any sort of article where you're arguing something, we're trying to inform or persuade your audience of something, it's always good to give examples, right? You make a claim that might be pretty complicated, so always try and illustrate it with examples. Here's an example from everyday life, right? You'll find this in scientific articles. Examples add to clarity, and they strengthen the sort of overall case the paper tries to make, okay? And when you're reading such an article, ask yourself, like, is this person, what's an example of this? Did he provide any examples? And see if that reflects badly on whatever it is that it's saying. Okay, and then it should have a good logical structure. Okay, and we'll talk about that structure. You guys are probably familiar with, to some extent at least, with this structure. Have you guys written an essay before? All right, so we're gonna look at we're gonna go over these headings. So first, what is it, right? What sort of writing is it? Second, understanding its purpose, and then we're gonna look at some differences between analytic writing and other kinds of writings, right? Quickly. And then we're gonna briefly look at the importance of evidence-based arguments in general, right? Which is a really important part of analytic writing. And part of doing that will be understanding arguments and argument types and the components of an argument and so on and so forth, okay? Also, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but if you have a question, just interrupt me at any time, okay? Don't wait till like I finish the point or something like that and then ask. So just anytime, you can raise your hand, interrupt me, don't worry about it. Okay, so what is it? What is analytic writing? Do you guys have thoughts about that? Comes to mind when you hear analytic writing? Well, okay, what do you remember last time we spoke about not using a term
Oh, yeah.
to define a term that you're trying to define, right? So analytic, analyzing. Well, then the question is what is it to analyze something? Giving details, breaking it down.
Yeah.
Right? That's what the word comes from, to break something down. Okay. All right. So it's writing in which you break something down. Okay, what else? What does that mean? So that's right. Focus on breaking down ideas and examining their components or parts. All right. Another meaning that it has is this critical thinking aspect, right? When it comes to interpreting or evaluating, which we're going to do eventually, okay? This idea of evaluation is very important. What that means is basically being able to say whether this argument is good or not. And what does it mean to be good, a good argument, right? Or a bad argument. And then explaining the subject, which is pretty obvious. Often associated with answering how and why questions, okay, by providing detailed analysis and insights. So this idea of like, as you said, detail. Okay. And some examples are like literary analysis, like if you're gonna analyze, I don't know, some part of a Shakespearean play or something, right? By looking into its different literary components. Okay. That's a kind of analytic writing, or scientific articles like the one we looked at last class, or philosophical essays, okay? And we're going to look at one today, okay? Okay, so those are the sort of common descriptions you'll find of this kind of writing, right? The key idea being this breakdown of ideas and sort of their interrelation with each other, right? But with what point in mind, right? What's the point? What's the purpose of doing that? Why would anybody do that? Okay, so this is where we get into the purpose of it. A couple of things to say here. One is obviously for like exploratory purposes, even to deepen complex topics, right? If something is a very abstract topic that people usually find difficult understanding, you provide an analysis of it, you break it down into simpler parts so that your reader could better understand it, right? It's a familiar idea. Another purpose of analytic writing is to present well-structured arguments and interpretations, okay? This is really important, like well-structured, being able to clearly articulate your case, okay? You're gonna say, okay, this is true. I think this is the case. Being able to clearly then present a case for it, okay? And finally, one important purpose of analytic style of writing is to help your readers understand the relationship between the ideas that you're discussing and their implications, okay? Like what they lead to, which is really key, right? So if you accept this, then you have to accept all these other things. And clearly showing why those other things come from this thing, okay? An important part of analytic writing is this. And you'll see this also in a lot of philosophy and in a lot of science as well, okay? This implication of ideas. It's not easy to often see how two ideas are related. So when you develop analytic writing skills, you can better explain how ideas are related and follow from each other, okay? Okay. Some differences between this kind of writing and other types of writing, like, for example, descriptive and persuasive kinds of writing, right? These are not, by the way, mutually exclusive, okay? So like a single article or paper or essay or whatever might have all types, right?
Yeah.
But one of them might be like the dominant one, okay? So they're not like exclusive. So if you're like writing an analytic paper, it doesn't mean like you can't also describe things in the paper, or it can't be a paper that by which you're trying to persuade somebody. Doesn't mean that. It just means, one of them will be the kind of main one, right? These types of writing first differ in their purposes, right? They have different purposes in mind. We looked at the purpose of analytical writing. When you guys see, this term descriptive writing or persuasive writing, what comes to mind in terms of its purpose? Like, what do you think is the purpose of that? I think like number 2 is pretty self-explanatory, right? Like, what are you trying to do there? What do you guys think?
Number 2,
Yeah,
you're trying to get someone to agree with you.
basically, right? To persuade them,
Yeah.
right? That's the point of it. What about number 1?
Just introduce something to someone.
Introduce it, yeah, by doing what? Exactly, by describing it, right?
Yeah.
You're not necessarily trying to get them to accept something, right? You're just saying,
Objective.
yeah, you might just like, I don't know, you might just describe like some object that you saw or some place that you've been to or something like that. You're not trying to convince, right? You're just providing information, and that's it. And as you said, you're listing like facts or details, without any sort of argumentation or analysis, right? Okay. In a persuasive type of writing, right? So an example would be like, okay, you make a statement like the volcano erupted in 1883, causing widespread destruction, right? Pretty straightforward claim, descriptive claim. In a persuasive sort of writing, as Johnson said, you're trying to convince someone of something, trying to get them to accept something, and your focus is more not just giving information, but trying to like make a case, right? Trying to argue something. Okay. Like, for example, if you were to say governments must invest in disaster preparedness to prevent future tragedies, right? That's a more like we'll see later, it's called a prescriptive claim as opposed to a descriptive one, right? You're saying something about what should be done. Okay. You usually don't find these kinds of things in descriptive essays, but persuasive ones and analytic ones. So in analytic writing and even persuasive writing, these two could really come together, right? Because both kinds of writings involve argumentation, it's important to understand why argumentation is important, okay? And specifically evidence-based argumentation, right? Why would this be of sort of value to us, right? Any takes, right? Why is this important, right? Why can't I just, when I write something, when I write a book, when I write a paper, why can't I just make some claims and that's it? Again, why is it important that I should give you evidence?
You mean choosing, like,
Okay.
you mean choose,
Truth. So argumentation is important for truth.
yes,
Evidence-based argumentation, is that the thought?
yeah.
Okay.
I'd say something else. I'd
Okay.
say like, if you provide a claim with no evidence, then the audience is not just gonna assume that it's like, actually, no, yeah, sort of, it's not gonna assume that it's real or something that can potentially happen.
Okay. So so you're saying something like build some kind of trust with your audience so that they take what you say like seriously or something like that. Otherwise, they're not going to just accept what you say,
Yeah.
right? So it's important for purposes of persuading your audience. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Why should we give evidence? Why is that important? Why can't you just argue without giving evidence?
Then it won't be persuasive.
Won't be persuasive. Okay.
Doesn't it also make you look a bit more weak?
Okay. Doesn't make you look good. That's the reason. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Someone could just be like, you're just kind of talking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, that's good. Generally speaking, yeah, you could say that a fact is something objective and an opinion is not, right? You could say that. Although what's important for us to sort of note is that you can give arguments for opinions. Okay. So I might have an opinion about the way the government should be run, right? And I could give arguments for that, right? So opinion is not necessarily something that is just sort of, purely worthless as far as like, argumentation goes. Okay. Exactly. Like I can try and get you guys to accept my opinion about something, right? Let's say you disagree with me about it, right? Say we disagree about what, I don't know, sports team is better, And then I might give you some reasons for why the team I say is better than the one that you favor. Okay? But generally speaking, yeah, a fact is something about something out there in the world. Okay. Something, yeah, something natural, right? Not always natural. It could also be about something conventional, right? Like it's a fact that like this is a table, right? A table that was not something natural. Or it's a fact that in Canada, you got how long do you have to live here to become a citizen?
I don't know, actually.
Like 5 years, right?
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
close to that.
Yeah, like that's a fact, okay? But that is not a natural fact, right? That's something that's like a social convention, right? So these facts could be about natural things, they could be about also non-natural things, like artificial things and social things, right? Okay, good. And an opinion can be about something factual or not. Okay, and in both cases, you can give argumentation. Okay. Now look at these examples, and I just want you guys to take like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 minutes, or I mean 3 minutes to sort of categorize them. Okay. Into factual statements and statements based on opinion. All right. And then we'll just quickly go over them. And this is going to be important because when you're going to read and analyze and write your own analytical essays, it's good to keep this distinction in mind, right? Because sometimes an author might make a claim that he says is factual, but it's not, right? So it's important to, in your analysis, be able to point these things out. Okay, yeah, so just go ahead, do that. Let's think about them briefly, and then we can go through them, okay? So let me time you guys. I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes. First one, what do you think?
That's fact.
It's fact?
Yeah.
Yeah. All of you? Okay, good. Yeah, that's right. What about the second?
Opinion.
Yeah. Third?
I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm just gonna say the fact.
Okay. Factual. Okay. What about the fourth?
Fact.
Okay, good. Yeah, so fifth?
Opinion.
Yeah. Sixth?
Fact.
Seventh?
Opinion.
Eighth?
Opinion.
Ninth?
Fact.
10th?
Fact.
11th?
Opinion.
And then the last one?
Opinion.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, you guys have a good sense of this. But notice that, like for all the ones that you guys said are opinion, there you could still argue for them, right? Like I might want to persuade you guys that climate change is the biggest challenge, right? That's my opinion. And I want it to be your opinion too. That's where the arguments come in. Okay. So opinion is not necessarily something like just like your own kind of made up thing, People tend to think that. If your arguments are correct, let's say I want to convince you guys that climate change is the biggest challenge, right? That humanity faces today. And I give you some strong arguments. And you guys are like, whoa, yeah, we accept those arguments, and then you become persuaded of this statement, then this statement becomes factual. It's a fact that climate change is the biggest challenge that humanity faces today. So it becomes factual. Okay. if my arguments are strong enough, if they kind of sort of are tested and they pass the test, right?
Yeah.
So opinion is not something always made up. Okay. It could be factual too. Right? It just might not be clear at first. Okay. But some opinions are just opinions. You know what I mean? They're just opinions. Like I might say, I don't know, like Harry Potter is my favorite novel. Right? Like that's just like a personal thing about me. Okay, good. This is an important distinction that you should know and keep in mind, okay? Because you'll come across these kinds of statements in your again reading of argumentative literature. Descriptive, even non-argumentative. The difference between a descriptive statement and a prescriptive one, okay? This is really important in argumentation because people often confuse these two.
Yeah.
Okay. They confuse them in discussions, they confuse them in writing. So it's important to be able to pick them out. What's a descriptive statement? Basically, it's a statement that just describes the way something is, right? Like many people recycle, right? A prescriptive statement is a statement about how things should be or shouldn't be. Right? So like everyone should recycle or everyone should not recycle. Okay? That's what the word prescription means. It means you're prescribing something. You're saying that people should or shouldn't do something, or should or shouldn't be a certain way, as opposed to just describing. Okay? And this, just to keep this in mind, is one of the important differences between a subject like ethics and other subjects, right?
Yeah.
In ethics, it's not like physics, where what's one difference between them? In physics, we have descriptive statements, right? E equals mc squared. Or, gravity has a certain attractive force, or whatever. In ethics, in a subject like ethics, we have prescriptive statements. You should do this, you shouldn't do this. People should, be a certain way or not be. Okay. So this is important. It's good. It's really important to be able to, when you're analyzing an analytical piece of writing, to be able to say, this statement that the author makes is actually a descriptive statement or a prescriptive statement. Because as we'll see, it'll be important go back to the argument, the kind of conclusions you can draw from the premises. Because if you have, for example, premises, all of which are prescriptive statements, and your conclusion from them is descriptive, that's going to be a problem. Okay? Or if you have your premises, all of which are descriptive, but in the conclusion you make from them, it's something prescriptive, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay? So you got to be able to sense this, like, oh, he can't conclude this because this is a descriptive. You can't get it from prescriptive, and so on, and the other way around. Okay? So keep that in mind. Is this statement descriptive or is it prescriptive? Okay, very important in analysis and so analytical writing. Clear?
Yeah.
Is this distinction clear? You get it? Good. Yeah, so just very quickly come up with some statements of your own, okay? Um, so 3 examples, you could choose whether they can all, one of them should at least be descriptive if the other 2 are going to be prescriptive and vice versa, okay? So come up with some examples of your own. And yeah, I want to hear some. I'll give you 1 minute.